Well, good morning to you, friends. Richard back here again for another Firepit conversation. And good to be back here again and be able to talk with you and share some more thoughts as we begin to wrap up another week. I pray everyone is doing well. I pray that you had a good week and that you've been able to really just find time and spend some time in the Lord's presence throughout your week and all that, and find that margin in your life for that. It's been a good week on my end. We've been, I'm sitting here on this rainy morning, but the week has been it's been good. And there's been on the go quite a bit, but at the same time, I've had some good time and margin through my week just to spend some time contemplating God and contemplating what He's up to in my life, and which has been really good. So, where I am this week is just, and actually really this morning, and really contemplating the idea of time and margin, and really receiving God's presence and knowing that He is present in everything that we do in the dailies. And that's, I was in a process in that this morning, and writing in my journal a little bit about it. And, it's very easy. Friends, it's very easy to find ourselves in days where we forget that God is there with us, that God is always present. Even Jesus promised us at the end of Matthew, after the Great Commission, that as He ascended to heaven, was saying that He'd be with us even to the end of the age. And what does that mean? When you think about that, I just want to pose this question to you, and for you just to contemplate for your own self. What does it mean to you for God to always be present in your life, to always be there, to always be a part of your daily walk, even in the littlest things? One of my favorite reads, it's been a few years since I've read it, and I probably shouldn't, I actually would like to read it again now I'm thinking about it, but is Brother Lawrence's book, practicing the practice of the presence of God. Almost forgot the title for a second. If you know anything about Brother Lawrence and who he was, he was a monk in this monastery a few hundred years back, and he was, I would almost venture to say, maybe the least of them. He was clumsy, but he was also, he was kind of the worker, wash the dishes, all that kind of stuff. But in the midst of everything that he did and the way he operated in life, he learned one valuable thing, and that was to learn to receive God's presence in everything that he did, in every aspect of his day, in every aspect of his life. He received and knew that God was present. When he's washing dishes, he knew God was present, and no matter, in every little thing. And how often do we forget that, right? How much we mean to God, how much we mean to Him as His image bearers, as His children, as His sons, as His daughters. That in of itself should tell you a lot about what we mean to Him. It's so easy to diminish our existence, and so easy to diminish who we think we are. And even I've been guilty of that at times, where there's been days where I feel like I'm not worthy enough to live the life that I have, to have the family that I have, to be able to walk in God's presence, to even be able to work to provide the way my family deserves. Little things. All these little things. There are often times, or even that I wasn't worthy enough of the calling, the mission, to to speak to people's hearts, to be here talking to you, to be able to lead men's weekends and be able to minister to the hearts of men in different capacities. I didn't feel, and oftentimes I felt unworthy to be able to do that. And then I remember 4 years ago, I was at and I know I've mentioned this weekend before, but I was in Colorado at a intensive weekend called Become Good Soil. And Mark Woods, he was the facilitator, mentor assigned, one of them that was assigned to me and my story group of 3 men, along with Jim Morrison. And Mark, I always remember as we went to wrap up the weekend, and it was either on the last night or the final morning, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but he turned to me, and it was such a profound thing, and it was an unexpected thing. But he turned to me and he just looked me, he put his hand on my shoulder, looked me right in the eyes, and just said, God wants you to know that you are worthy. I mean, I didn't know what to do with that. I mean, I just looked at him and smiled, and I remember tearing up like, wow. I mean, I think that spoke into something that I didn't know of myself, that I didn't feel worthy enough for this life, that I didn't feel worthy enough to be invited to that weekend, that I didn't feel worthy enough to be able to pursue this mission and this calling that God has placed in my heart. And I'm just covering up my book here a little bit because the rain's starting to drop on me a little bit this morning. And I'll get to that in a second. But, you know, that's something so profound, you know, and I have to forget about that. That moment was such a significant thing, because I think in many respects, and I think a lot of us, and many of us, if not all of us, have dealt with this in many ways. This almost spirit of diminishment, disqualification, of not being worthy, of the call that God's placed in our heart, of not being in His presence, and not truly being able to walk in the identity of being a son or a daughter. But that's who we are. Those of us that have chosen to say yes to Jesus and choosing to walk with Him, we have been called sons through Christ Jesus. We are His children. We have been called child of God. So those of us who choose to believe have been called a child of God. And that's the reality. And as a child of God, I mean, think about it. For you, if you're a parent, you know, if you're there in your kids' lives, I mean, I would it'd be hard pressed to say that you didn't want to be there and be present with your kids. That was one thing that was very important to me as my kids have grown up. The last of my kids, my daughter just graduated high school last week, which was an amazing thing to watch and to see that culmination of all her years of work. But you know, over the course of their growing up, you know, there were opportunities to take positions, and this, I'm not saying this to diminish anybody, just so don't hear what I'm not saying. But there were opportunities to take positions in different jobs that would have kept me on the road in different capacities, in different ways, that while the income would have been real good, it would have done something that I just could not do. I did not want to grow up with my kids not having me present. And when I had the opportunity to begin working from my home for several years, that was an opportunity that I was going to jump on and take every bit of advantage of that I could, because it allowed me to stay present to my kids. And I think that's something that we've lost in many respects, is that it's so easy to not be present, to be off working, to be off doing other things, and it taking us away from the importance of being present to our kids in our daily life. And so transition that and contrast that to God and the way He wants to be present with His own kids, with His own children. I guarantee you that that's exactly what He wants to do. He wants to be here and wants to be present in everything that we do, right? And He's called us worthy of that. He's called us worthy as His sons and daughters through Jesus Christ. So to be able to walk in that, to be able to receive that and know that that is the truth and reality of who we are, I think is utterly important for us, friends. And so think about that for your own life. Think about that where you feel like, have you felt unworthy or diminished, or fell under the spirit of diminishment, where you feel unworthy and unqualified to be there, to be worthy of the calling on your heart, to be worthy of the calling that God has placed on you, to be worthy of the mission that He may be laying out for you, whatever that mission is. I was at a meeting with a customer yesterday, and it was actually at a church. I was looking at doing a security system for their church building, and I saw it as I pulled out of the parking lot. And I've seen these signs before, but as I pulled out of the parking lot, the sign right there at the end of the parking lot as you pulled out said, "You are now entering the mission field." And I was just thinking about that, and that's for all of us. There is a mission laid out for every single one of us, but do we choose to step in and receive and walk in that in our daily life? Or do we feel unworthy of that, or uncalled, or unqualified, or whatever it may be? Again, it goes back to just knowing God's presence in your daily life, and knowing that He is with you, and He's the one that's calling you out, and He's the one that wants to lead you in whatever it is that He's calling you into. He's there, and I've learned to. I've really had to really learn to receive that in my daily, in the calling, in the way I work in ministry, and try to pursue that. And I used to think it was meant to be this big vocational thing, and I don't know what God has in for me in the future, but I do know that is still a passion and a direction that He's leading me into, and that's where I will continue to head. But I will do it in a way where I still walk with Him in it, and know that He is there and leading me through it all. And until He says no, and He hasn't said no, then I will step into that mission, however it ends up going. And so, and I was reading this morning, and you may have read the story before, but I was pointed to Judges chapter 6, where God calls Gideon out to face the Midianites, and it speaks to that. It speaks to this idea of being called out, of being called worthy, even when you felt unworthy of the calling. And I'm going to read it. I'm going to attempt to read it in this rain here as it comes down on me. But Judges chapter 6, verse 11, where it says, "The angel of the Lord came, and he says, 'Mighty hero, the Lord is with you.'" I mean, just right there. The mighty hero. Message it says the mighty warrior. Now the translation, it says man of valor in the ESV. I mean, just to hear that calling out. I mean, and Gideon didn't look at himself as worthy. He looked at his clan as the least in their tribe, in the tribe of Manasseh, and that he was the least in his clan. So he did not feel worthy enough at all. But for the Lord and the angel of the Lord to be able to step in and immediately call him out in that identity, man of valor, man of mighty warrior, mighty hero. I mean, that says a lot right in and of itself. I mean, that just stuck out to me big time. Then I'll continue on. He says, Gideon, seeing his kind of unsureness, he says, Gideon replied, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." So it didn't feel like the Lord was actually with them. And Lord God turns directly to him now. This wasn't the angel of the Lord. This was now God saying to him, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." Gideon replies, "How can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." And the Lord said to him, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. And it's just an amazing thing to think about. As I was pondering those verses this morning of what that meant, just for Gideon to be called out, a man who didn't feel worthy enough to be called out. And I think that's been the truth for so many of us, that we haven't felt worthy of the calling on our lives. But God has called you worthy of whatever that calling is on your life. And if you don't know what that calling is, I mean, that's where it's incumbent upon you to just start spending some time with him and asking him, Lord, where are you calling me? What is the next frontier? Where are you trying to lead me? Right? It may not be necessarily in a ministry field. It's a ministry of some type, but it may not be what we consider vocational ministry, but it may be right where you are right now. But talk to him about that. Ask God about that. What does that look like in your life? How can I pursue you, and how can I bring your presence into my daily life? And what does that mean for the mission that you have? What is the mission you have laid out before me? I think so many times that we just don't feel like there is a mission for us, or even when things get tough, that we kind of shirk away and step away from what had been the mission, even though it may not be time. Even though it's something that we weren't meant to step away from, but we allowed diminishment, we allowed fear, we allowed the cares of this world and the fears of this world and the worries and all that to get in the way, and it pulled us away from all that. And my hope is for not just for me, but for you, for all of us, as God's sons and God's daughters through Jesus Christ, that we will see ourselves as worthy of the calling in our lives, as worthy of being called sons, as worthy of being called daughters. That is the most important thing in your life, to be a son, to be a daughter. That is the most important thing about you. Not anything else you've ever been, everything else you've ever done, but your identity is the first and most important thing to begin with. And from that point is where you begin to step out, and you can choose to step into, okay, what is it? Where is God leading me now? Where is he training me? Where is he trying to take my life? So that's where I am this week, friends. And just it's this whole thing of receiving and knowing that God is present, and knowing that God is the one that's calling us out. And God has called us worthy. He wouldn't be calling us out if he didn't think we were worthy enough of that calling, right? But he's called us worthy because of Jesus Christ, because of what Jesus has done for us by his life, death, his resurrection, and ascension to the right hand of the Father, that we are now called out as his sons and daughters. So choose to step in that, but it's in your choosing. It's in your choosing to do so. If you don't do it, then you're wasting the opportunity that's been laid out before you. And you were told, and even Paul said, make the most of every opportunity we have in these days. So how are you going to take advantage of that? So that's really where I am this week, friends. So I appreciate you listening and tuning in this week. And so we'll see. I'll be back next week, and I'll share with more thoughts. And look forward to seeing you back next time for another Fire Pit conversation. Until then, friends, I pray that you take care, and God bless.